take today is Overview of Cellular Respiration, which is topic 4.4 from your textbook. They are on page number 107. Okay. So let's talk about a verse which is related to the Quran. We have the various plants and seeds which are medicine, whose names are mentioned in the Quran, which are used for treatment, like cinnamon and what are the other things we use as medicine? We use the black seed and the various other things which are mentioned in the Quran, which are good for our health. Okay, so you can find the various verses in the Quran which are related to the benefit which we get from the plants, subhanallah. And let's move on to the objectives for this topic. They are to describe the process of cellular respiration and to compare cellular respiration to photosynthesis. Now we discuss in detail what is photosynthesis already, so we shall come to the difference between cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Okay, so let's do a KWL. Okay, so what is the structure which you see in this picture?
Mitochondria.
Yeah, it is a mitochondria. How did you identify it as mitochondria, Lee?
We took it last year in the cell organelles.
Because of the?
We took it last year.
Yeah. So, of course, the process of cellular respiration, it deals with the release of energy. So mitochondria, they are the powerhouses of the cell wherein the ATP is released or ATP is made, we can say. Okay. So in this picture, you can see the mitochondrion. You can also identify it with its double folded outer membrane, the cristae, with the help of which you can identify it as mitochondria. And you can see it is where the energy is produced. We shall talk about in detail in this topic. Okay, so how many of you watched the video which I sent on the group yesterday?
I watched me.
Okay, would anyone want to speak about it? You want to summarize the video? Who wants to do it?
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, during the cellular respiration, the organism breaks down nutrients in order to produce energy in the form of ATP. Example, if we zoom in the bird cell, we can see the mitochondria, which the majority of the cellular respiration occur. So in the single respiration, it consists of 4 stages. They are glycolysis, preparatory reaction, citric acid, and electron transport chain. And glycolysis, it occurs in the cytoplasm outside the mitochondria, and it doesn't need for oxygen. And in this step, the enzymes will split the glucose into 2 or 3 carbon molecules and make 2 molecules of ATP. And also during this acid, 2 ATP molecules are produced and NADH is released. In the second stage, which is preparatory reaction, the pyruvates of glycolysis, they will move into mitochondria where they convert into acetyl-CoA, which is more NADH is produced and the carbon dioxide is released. And in the third stage, which is citric acid cycle, the remaining carbon from the initial glucose, it will be oxidized and the carbon dioxide will be released. And NADH and FADH2 is produced and also ATP molecules. And in the last stage, which is electron transport, the energy that carries the molecules from the glycolysis and the Krebs cycle will enter the cellular respiration. That's it.
Excellent. That was very well explained, Layan. Excellent. So as Layan explained, cellular respiration is almost like a mirror image of photosynthesis. Energy as is produced during photosynthesis during the light dependent reactions, the NADPH and ATP are produced, and during the light independent, the glucose is produced. Similarly, during when we are talking about the cellular respiration, as Layan explained, we can either split it into 4 stages, or according to your book, we split it into stage 1, which is Krebs cycle, and stage 2, which is electron transport. Okay, so by the end of which the ATP or the energy is released. Perfect. Thank you so much, Nayan. So let's discuss about how it happens. So the key concept for this topic is the overall process of cellular respiration converts sugar into ATP using oxygen. Okay, so the sugars, they are broken down and energy is released. Okay, so the term cellular respiration may lead you to form a mental picture of cells breathing. So this image is not correct, but it is useful to remember, right? So your cells, they need the oxygen that you take in when you breathe. That oxygen helps your body release the energy in sugars and other carbon-based molecules. That means whenever you're taking in oxygen, it not only helps you to survive, but it also helps you to helps in breaking down the glucose molecules and releasing energy in your body. So indirectly, your breathing is connected to the ATP that your cells need for everything you do. Okay. This is what we have over here. The oxygen you inhale, it helps your body to release chemical energy that is stored in sugars and other carbon-based molecules. The energy is released to produce ATP, and this process of using oxygen to produce ATP by breaking down carbon-based molecules is called cellular respiration. If you want to define it, you will define it as a process which uses oxygen to produce ATP or energy. How? By breaking down the various glucose, otherwise known as the carbon-based molecules in your body. And this process is known as cellular respiration. So cellular respiration makes most of the ATP that a cell needs. And cellular respiration, it is an aerobic process. Aerobic meaning?
It needs oxygen. It needs oxygen.
Excellent. It needs oxygen, and aerobic means that, yeah, it needs oxygen to happen. So let's talk about the first subtopic, which is cellular respiration makes ATP by breaking down sugars. So plants, they use photosynthesis to make their own food, and animals, they eat other organisms as food. But food is not a direct source of energy. We cannot get our energy directly by eating our food. Instead, plants, animals, and other eukaryotes, they break down molecules from food to produce ATP. So this food we eat, it needs to be broken down to produce the energy we need in order to perform our daily activities. Okay, so cellular respiration, it releases the chemical energy from sugars and other carbon-based molecules to make ATP when oxygen is present. So for this process to take place, oxygen is very, very important. Okay, so that is why in our body, the intake of oxygen is important not only for breathing, but also for this process of releasing energy. So cellular respiration is aerobic process, meaning it needs oxygen to take place, and cellular respiration takes place in mitochondria, which are often called the cell's powerhouses because they make most of the cell's ATP. So this process of cellular respiration takes place in mitochondria, like the photosynthesis, it takes place in the chloroplast of the plant cell. So a mitochondrion, it cannot directly make ATP from food. First, foods are broken down into smaller molecules such as glucose. Then glucose is broken down by this equation, as you can see in this picture here, by the process of glycolysis. Okay, so glycolysis, what does it do? It splits glucose into 3 carbon molecules and makes 2 molecules of ATP. Okay, so this is known as glycolysis. What happens during this process? It splits one glucose molecule. You can see the 6-carbon sugar, which is glucose. It is split into 3 carbon molecules. Okay, so during this process, the energy is released. Okay, and it makes 2 molecules of ATP. The energy released during this breakdown of one glucose molecule is how much energy? How many molecules of ATP is released? 2 ATP molecules are released. So glycolysis, it takes place in cell cytoplasm and it does not need oxygen. For this glycolysis process to take place, the oxygen is not required. Glycolysis is an anaerobic process because it does not need oxygen to take place. However, glycolysis is necessary for cellular respiration. The products of glycolysis are broken down in mitochondria to make many more ATP. Alright, so the first step for this cellular respiration takes place is, you can say, glycolysis. Okay, so what happens in glycolysis, girls?
The carbon molecules, sugar molecules split into 2 3-carbon molecules and 2 molecules of ATP are released.
Right. So during the process of glycolysis, each molecule of glucose is broken down to make 2 3-carbon molecules, and during this process, 2 units of ATP, or you can say 2 ATP molecules, are released. So let's move on to the next page. The main important thing you need to remember is glycolysis. It is an anaerobic process and it takes place in the cytoplasm. It splits glucose into 2 3-carbon molecules and produces 2 ATP molecules. So before we move on, what is the function of cellular respiration?
To make ATP.
To make ATP.
And to convert glucose into available energy.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Diane. So let's talk about cellular respiration is like a mirror image of photosynthesis. How can we say that? The Krebs cycle, it transfers energy to an electron transport chain. But before that, photosynthesis and cellular respiration are not true opposites, but you can think about them in that way. For example, chloroplasts, they absorb energy from sunlight and build sugars. In mitochondria, mitochondria release chemical energy to make ATP. Okay, so that photosynthesis, it takes place in chloroplasts. Chloroplasts, what do they do during the light-dependent reactions? They absorb energy from sunlight and they make sugars. Whereas mitochondria, they release chemical energy to make ATP. The chemical equation of cellular respiration is also basically the reverse of photosynthesis. But the structures of chloroplast and mitochondria are similar. A mitochondrion is surrounded by a membrane. It has 2 parts that are involved in cellular respiration, the matrix and the inner mitochondrial membrane. So in mitochondria, cellular respiration takes place in 2 stages. Stage 1 is the Krebs cycle and stage 2, it is the electron transport. Okay, so this picture which you can see on the slide, it is of Krebs cycle. In Krebs cycle, it transfers the energy to the electron transport chain. It takes place in the mitochondria's matrix. The inner substance which you can see inside the membrane, it is known as matrix, and this folded membrane, it is known as cristae. Okay, it breaks down 3 carbon molecules from glycolysis. I will talk about this process of Krebs cycle into steps so that it is clear for you to understand. It makes a small amount of ATP, it releases carbon dioxide and transfers energy carrying molecules. Now, how does it happen? Okay. You can see the same picture in your textbook on page number 108, wherein clearly you can see all the steps which are involved. So we should talk about the steps involved in the Krebs cycle first. Okay, Krebs cycle is the stage 1 of cellular respiration. The Krebs cycle, it produces molecules that carry energy to the second part of cellular respiration, similarly as the energy is released from the first part of photosynthesis and carried to the second part. The Krebs cycle, named for the scientist who discovered the process, it takes place in the interior space or matrix of the mitochondria. The name Krebs cycle because scientist Krebs he discovered it. It takes place in this inner space of mitochondria known as the matrix. It is the place wherein the Krebs cycle takes place. So in step 1, the 3 carbon molecules from glycolysis are broken down. Okay, so the 3 carbon molecules from glycolysis, you know how the 3 carbon molecules are released from glycolysis. We just now studied that during glycolysis, each 6 carbon sugar is broken down into 2 3 carbon molecules. Okay, now these 3 carbon molecules in step 1 of Krebs cycle, they form from the glycolysis, they are broken down in a cycle of chemical reaction. That means they are further broken down. So a small number of ATP molecules are made and other types of energy carrying molecules are also made. So during this process, when these 3 carbon molecules are further broken down, a small amount of ATP is released and also other types of energy carrying molecules are also made. So carbon dioxide is given off as a waste product during this process. Then in step 2, energy is transferred to the second stage of cellular respiration, which is the electron transport. Okay, so you can see this is the inner membrane and the matrix area, it is enclosed by the inner membrane, and you can see the 3 carbon molecules, they are further split into the simpler compounds, and you can see the ATP is released like this, and also the carbon dioxide, it is produced as the waste product. You can see here. Okay, and this energy which is released during this Krebs cycle, it is used for the second part of the cellular respiration, which is the electron transport. Now what happens in electron transport chain? An electron transport chain is made up of proteins. It needs energy carrying molecules from the Krebs cycle and oxygen to make ATP. Okay, so during the second stage of the cellular respiration, the electron transport chain, it is made up of proteins. And what does it need? It needs the energy carrying molecules from the Krebs cycle, which the energy carrying molecules which have been released by breaking down the 3 carbons, those, and also what else is required? Oxygen to make the ATP. This part of the process takes place in and across the inner mitochondrial membrane. Okay, so this is the inner mitochondrial membrane. So this electron transport, the second stage, it takes place in and around the inner mitochondrial membrane. So in step 3, energy is transferred to a chain of proteins in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. The energy released from the Krebs cycle, it is transferred to the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Then a large number of ATP molecules are made. Oxygen enters the process and is used to make water molecules, and water and heat are given off as waste products. Okay, so you can see this is the process taking place in the inner membrane, including the 6 carbon dioxide and energy from the glycolysis. And then you can see water and what else is released as a waste product apart from water?
Carbon dioxide. No, sorry.
Water and heat. Water and heat are given off as the waste products. Okay, you can see also in this picture here, during the electron transport chain, it produces a large amount of ATP. Okay, it takes place in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Energy transferred to the electron transport chain. Oxygen enters the process and ATP is produced, and water and heat are released as the byproduct. Okay, so this is what it happens in the second process, the glycolysis. So this is how the energy is released by the entire process of cellular respiration. In first step, the Krebs cycle takes place in the first stage and the electron transport is the second stage. In step 1, what happens? The 3 carbon molecules from glycolysis, they are broken down in a cycle of chemical reactions. A small amount of ATP is made and also the other types of energy carrying molecules are made. and during this process the carbon dioxide is given off. Now the energy is transferred to the second stage of cellular respiration. So what happens in electron transport? The energy is transferred to a chain of proteins in the inner membrane of the mitochondria here. Then a large amount of ATP is produced and oxygen enters the process and it is used to make water molecules. So by the end of this process, water and heat are released and a lot of energy is produced. So up to 38 ATP molecules are made from the breakdown of one glucose molecule. Okay, so one glucose molecule is ultimately broken down and 38 ATP molecules are made from each glucose molecule. Okay, first during the process of glycolysis, the glucose is broken down into simpler carbon atoms, and these simpler carbon atoms, they are further broken down in order to release 38 ATP molecules. 2 from glycolysis. If you calculate how the 38 ATP molecules are released, you get 2 from glycolysis and 34 or 36 from cellular respiration, all together making 38. The equation for cellular respiration this is the equation for cellular respiration, okay, but it actually has many more steps. For example, the cellular respiration equation includes glycolysis, and many enzymes are also part of this process which are not included in this equation. The equation just shows glucose plus 6 oxygen gives rise to 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 H2O, and during this process a lot of ATP is released, and also the glycolysis takes place before this particular equation takes place. Okay, so to compare cellular respiration with photosynthesis, you can check out this equation. As you can see, photosynthesis, it uses the products of cellular respiration, that is, it uses carbon dioxide and water. It converts energy from sunlight into sugars, and cellular respiration needs the products of photosynthesis. Okay, so you can say both these products, they need the byproducts of both these reactions. For example, photosynthesis, it needs carbon dioxide and water, which are released as the end products of cellular respiration, and cellular respiration, it needs oxygen. Right, so it releases stored energy from sugars to make ADP that can be used by the cells. So you can see this is in the picture, the process of photosynthesis and cellular respiration. You can see in the reactions, this is how you can compare both these processes. You can see in photosynthesis, the reactants are the carbon dioxide and water, which are released during the process of cellular respiration, and these are used with the help also in the presence of energy from the sunlight. They are converted to sugars, that is glucose and oxygen. This is what happens in the process of photosynthesis. It happens in chloroplast. Okay, whereas coming to the cellular respiration, the products are the carbon dioxide and water which are released, whereas the reactants are the sugars and the oxygen. So these sugars we can either get from the plants which we eat, or from the any food which we eat, any animal or plant food. Plus, of course, we need oxygen for the cellular respiration to take place, and the products which are released by the cellular respiration are carbon dioxide and water, which are again used in the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so we can say both these processes, they are interrelated. In the process of photosynthesis, the light energy is used, and in the process of cellular respiration, the ATP, which is heat energy, is released, which is used by the humans and animals for their daily activities. Okay, so the reactants in photosynthesis are the same as the products of cellular respiration. This you can see by comparing these two processes in this picture. Any doubts, girls?
No.
Is it clear?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you questions. What are the reactants and products in cellular respiration? What are they? The reactants and products in cellular respiration?
The reactants are glucose and oxygen, and the products are carbon dioxide and water.
Excellent. And what are the products and reactants in photosynthesis?
the opposite. So the reactants are carbon dioxide and water, which are the products in cellular respiration, and the products in photosynthesis are glucose and oxygen, which are the reactants in cellular respiration.
Excellent. So you can say the exact opposite happening in photosynthesis. Very good. And does glucose actually react with oxygen during cellular respiration?
No, glucose is broken down into the three carbon molecules, and then when oxygen is taken into the process, the carbon dioxide is released. But it doesn't directly.
When does it enter? Oxygen, when does it enter this process?
In the second stage.
In the second stage during the electron transport. Okay, so we cannot say that glucose actually reacts with oxygen like we actually explain while explaining the cellular respiration. But what actually happens during this procedure is glucose is split by glycolysis prior to the Krebs cycle. Then the oxygen enters during the second stage, which is during electron transport chain. Okay, girls. One more information is glycolysis. It was probably among the first biochemical processes to evolve. It is likely that early forms of life produced ATP from glycolysis because the process takes place in the cytoplasm and it does not require oxygen. So probably this was the process which was used by the bacteria, which were anaerobic, and this is how maybe the energy was released. So according to endosymbiosis theory, mitochondria were once prokaryotes that were engulfed by other prokaryotes. And this process may have led to the evolution of cellular respiration. So during early times, the mitochondria itself were considered as a type of a prokaryotic organism. And then it was later discovered that it is one of a cell organelle which is present in the cell but not an organism on its own. Clear, girls, about this topic? Any doubts?
No.
Everything clear?
Yes.
Shall we solve the worksheet then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this is worksheet 10 on overview of cellular respiration. I want you all to take out your worksheets if you have downloaded or opened the worksheets. Okay. Question number 1. Circle the word or phrase that best completes the statement. Cellular respiration is a process that releases glucose or energy from sugars and other carbon-based molecules.
Energy.
It releases energy?
Yes.
Yes, it releases energy, of course, not glucose, from sugars and other carbon-based molecules. And to make ATP when oxygen or carbon dioxide is present.
Oxygen.
For the cellular respiration to take place, what is important? Oxygen or carbon dioxide? Oxygen is present. Excellent. Number 2, cellular respiration is called an aerobic process because it needs oxygen or carbon dioxide to take place. Obviously, it needs oxygen, that is why it is known as an aerobic process. So now, which is one of the anaerobic sub-processes of the cellular respiration?
The glycolysis.
The glycolysis, which takes place even without the presence of oxygen in the cytoplasm, the glycolysis. Very good. Number 3, cellular respiration takes place in the chloroplast or in the mitochondria?
Mitochondria.
Obviously, mitochondria. During glycolysis, one molecule of glucose or protein is split.
Glucose.
One molecule of glucose is split into 3 carbon molecules and 2 ADP or ATP are formed. 2 ATP are formed. Very good. Number 5, circle the 2 ways in which cellular respiration seems to be the opposite of photosynthesis. Can you read these 4 points A, B, C, D and tell me the 2 ways in which cellular respiration seems to be the opposite of photosynthesis?
B and C.
B.
B and
B.
C.
Are you sure it is D? I want you to try again. Yes, Layan? B and C. Very good. It is B and C. The overall chemical equations are the reverse of each other, as we just now discussed. And cellular respiration breaks down sugars to make ATP, and photosynthesis, it uses ATP to make sugars. Okay? So these are the two ways in which cellular respiration it seems to be opposite to photosynthesis, B and C. Now let's move on to number 6. Circle the two parts of the mitochondrion where cellular respiration takes place. Is it matrix, stroma, the inner mitochondrial membrane, or outer mitochondrial membrane?
Matrix A and C.
Remember.
Very good. It is A, the matrix, and C, the inner mitochondrial membrane wherein the electron transport takes place. Excellent. Number 7, the overall process of cellular respiration can be written as a chemical equation. Fill in the blanks in the equation below using the appropriate compound from the box. So what is the equation?
Glucose.
What comes here first?
Glucose.
Glucose plus
Oxygen.
oxygen. Very good. So we will write first 6 oxygen plus glucose, which is C6H12O6. It gives rise to
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide and water.
very good 6 carbon dioxide and 6 water molecule.
O6.
That's it. Okay, so the two reactants in the cellular respiration equation are, what are the two reactants?
Oxygen and glucose.
Yes, it is oxygen and glucose. You can either write in the form of chemical formula, or you can either write the names of them. Now, what are the two products of cellular respiration?
Carbon dioxide and water.
Carbon dioxide and water.
They are the carbon dioxide and water. Excellent. Number 10. Why is cellular respiration equation written with several arrows?
Because a series of chemical reactions occur.
Very good. Because a series of chemical reactions occur, that is why it is written with a lot of arrows. D is the right answer. Number 11, use the space below to sketch a mitochondrion and label the matrix and inner membrane and indicate where each of the following steps of the cellular respiration process occurs. Okay, so you need to draw the picture of the mitochondrion as it is given in your textbook, and you need to label these A, B, C, D as where they take place. So you may follow the diagram which is given on page number 108, draw it here and then label the steps A, B, C, D. Okay? Moving to number 12, the prefix glyco comes from a Greek word that means sweet, and the suffix lysis comes from a Greek word that means to loosen. Therefore, during glycolysis, a dash is broken down or loosened.
Sugar.
What is it which is broken down?
Sugar.
Sugar. Very good. Number 13, glycolysis is an anaerobic process because it takes place without
Oxygen.
Oxygen.
During the Krebs cycle, chemical reactions dash carbon-based molecules. What do they do, the chemical reactions?
Break down.
They break them down. They break down the carbon-based molecules. Okay, so these are the answers for the worksheet, girls. You may note down the answers. I'm also saving them down. I don't know if the answers are with the worksheet. Did I also give you the answers? Yeah, the answers are also with the worksheet. You may check the answers. So let's solve the MCQ worksheet as well.
Please, can you send the MCQ worksheet on Teams?
Sure, Lan, I shall send it today, inshallah. This is chapter 4, right? Is it 4?
Yes, 4.
Okay. Okay. Number 1. Which of the following types of organisms uses cellular respiration for their cellular energy needs? Are they eukaryotes, plants only, animals only, or prokaryotes?
Eukaryotes.
Yes, all the eukaryotes, they use the cellular respiration for their energy needs. So A is the answer. Number 2, which process breaks down sugars to make ATP when oxygen is present? Is it anaerobic respiration, cellular respiration, glycolysis, or photosynthesis?
Cellular respiration.
B, cellular respiration. Very good. Number 3, the part of cellular respiration in which glucose is broken down is called A, photosynthesis, B, aerobic respiration, C, electron transport, or D, glycolysis.
Glycolysis. D.
Yeah, it is D, glycolysis. The two products of Krebs cycle are, what are they? H2O and carbon dioxide, ATP and carbon dioxide, ATP and oxygen, or ADP and H2O?
ATP and carbon dioxide.
ATP and?
Carbon dioxide.
Very good. The ATP is released and also carbon dioxide is released during the first stage, which is Krebs cycle. Number 5, what provides the electron transport chain in cellular respiration with the energy it needs to function? A, ATP synthase, B, glycolysis, C, chlorophyll, or D, Krebs cycle?
D, Krebs cycle.
Yes, the energy released during Krebs cycle, it is used in the next stage,